Welcome all to this afternoon's panel session. What we're going to be talking about today is where innovation can transform healthcare. And my name is Moira Mackenzie. I'm the Deputy Chief Exec with the Digital Health and Care Innovation Centre in Scotland. So we're one of 7 innovation centres. Our role is looking very much at seeking and solving key challenges for health and care through innovation, working very much in collaboration with industry, academia and health and care practitioners. So I'm joined today by my 3 colleagues on the panel. I will ask them to introduce themselves one at a time. So Diane, I'll go to you first.
Thanks, Moira, and thank you for asking me to be part of the panel. I am the co-founder and CEO of Decipher Analytics, and we're a precision medicine company based in Edinburgh. And what we aim to do is to build large, uniform, highly curated and annotated data sets that can be used for AI and machine learning approaches to medicine and healthcare. And you might know that less than 20% of the world's medical data is available in a form that AI can ingest and learn from. So that's what we've been set up to do. And we aim to make that data much more accessible.
Thanks, Diane. Steve, come to you next.
Yep. Hi, I'm Steve Jelley. I'm the joint CEO of Dimension Studios, and we're an entertainment company making virtual reality, augmented reality, and holograms and digital humans, and then all sorts of virtual production. And we found ourselves making healthcare content at the start of the pandemic with Microsoft and Health Education England.
Thank you, Steve. Paul, over to you next.
Thanks, Moira. Yes, I'm Paul McGinness. I'm one of the directors and founders of StormID, which is a digital transformation agency based in Edinburgh. And over the last kind of 3 or 4 years, we've been involved a lot in kind of transforming healthcare using kind of data and AI and kind of patient-facing digital services.
Okay, so thank you. So today is a bit of a fireside chat, I'm thinking, trying to pull out all of your learning and experiences to share that with our audience here today. So thinking about where you're at in the vanguard of changes that have been going recently and trying to share those experiences with your colleagues, I've jotted down some kind of 3 or 4 questions that I'd like to ask you about and hopefully pull out some of those key experiences for people. So Diane, I'll start with you, but do you think the health and care landscape is shifting now to better embrace innovations and opportunities that are coming through from industry? And again, thinking about, the Scottish landscape, going beyond that to the UK, perhaps internationally, and just your thoughts and reflections on whether the COVID pandemic has had any impact on this most recently.
Thanks, Moira. So I think that the COVID pandemic has definitely had an impact on the landscape globally. And for us and for others working in the space of AI and machine learning, one of the big challenges for any organization is getting access to patient data. And there was a recent report from the ABPI and the Medicines Discovery Catapult that highlighted that this was a challenge for all industry from all shapes and sizes. And I think what's actually become much more apparent during the COVID pandemic is that patient data has become much more available, that different organizations have been collaborating together to build really interesting data sets focused on COVID in particular, which have been made available. And actually, I think that's been fantastic because for organizations like us, where getting access to data can at times be challenging, those data sets becoming more readily available enables companies who are working on machine learning and AI to get access to really high quality data. And again, that access to high quality digital data is one of the things that does impede adoption of AI and machine learning in medicine and healthcare. So I think there has been a huge transformation as a consequence of COVID, which I think has only been will only be for the benefit of patients and also for organizations like ourselves.
Thanks, Diane. Paul, any reflections from yourself on some of your experiences, not just in the COVID landscape, but maybe a bit beyond that as well?
Yeah, I would probably echo some of Diane's comments. I think healthcare has been, changing for a number of years now, and I think I think there's kind of two broader kind of themes that are emerging within healthcare. One's really the kind of rise of or the increasing importance, I guess, of the role of data and AI. I think the kind of center of gravity of health data is really shifting away from the acute setting, as Diane said, more towards kind of data that can be gathered outside of the healthcare system. And those kind of new data sets that can be created on the back of kind of patient-generated health data, when you combine them with data that's held in kind of legacy kind of health IT systems, which are over a long number of years, when you combine those two data sets together, you've got a really kind of unique data set that will allow the kind of creation of some of these new kind of AI or machine learning models that will help stratify patient risk and ultimately try and move some of the kind of care models to be more proactive and preventative. And I think the second kind of big, the second bigger trend is really the policy one, which is again trying to move healthcare from the acute setting, the kind of burden of healthcare from the acute setting and out into the community. And that's really to try and address some of the big challenges they've got around waiting times for outpatients and hospital readmission rates. And I think COVID really has acted as a kind of big catalyst for that. I think the healthcare professionals themselves are far more willing to kind of change their working practices. I think things like information governance has been speeded up a lot. And I think there's been a lot of more collaboration than there was before the pandemic, both within healthcare organisations and indeed between them as well.
I was conscious back in December that the Scottish Life Sciences Group had published their response plan for COVID-19. And within that, they were setting out, reminding us of the targets that were set for growth within the life sciences industry, 8 billion by 2035. And it seemed that certain aspects of that landscape were accelerating faster than others, mainly as a result of COVID. So again, the three priority areas that they've established for the next wee while are looking at the pharma supply chain, the whole health technology space, and also animal agriculture and aquaculture. So really heartening for me to see that the alignment of the industry priorities are very much coming into the same space as health and care priorities as well, and much more that collaborative environment that's being promoted. Can you tell us a wee bit about any cross-sectoral innovations then that you're involved in, and the impact that you think this is having on some key healthcare challenges? So Steve, I'll come to you first on that one. So tell us a wee bit about some of the work you're maybe doing in this space just now.
Yeah, so I personally have been looking at how to use immersive technologies, within healthcare and research settings for quite a long time. I did a 4-year collaboration with the Sanger Institute around single cell omics and how we could use VR to look at very high dimensional data sets. But the main part of what we do at Dimension Studios is we record holograms and we make AR and VR applications, for entertainment and for training. I mean, we recorded Madonna, dancing with herself at the Billboard Music Awards and things like that. And then when the pandemic happened, we have a big partnership with Microsoft. We make volumetric captures, which are filmed from every direction to create a 3-dimensional video, essentially. And we had worked with a company called HoloPatient, and we create these training materials on the HoloLens 2. And it was very early on, and we became aware of what Microsoft was doing to help the NHS around the ventilator challenge, and very quickly, a group of people was put together to help create training content. So it's probably best I show you some of this. I'll just do it really quickly. And this was at a time when there really was no travel or anything that we could do. Just 1 second. Bear with me. There we go. So we're working with Leeds Hospitals Trust, NHS, and actually all of the Nightingales, in the planning phase of that. And we went out and worked with Imperial. So this is a volumetric capture, like I've explained already, of one of the doctors from Imperial College. demonstrating how to put on PPE. And if you remember, at the time, there was a lot of confusion around this, and the medical guidance was changing on a day-by-day basis. But it's very useful because you can see, how to handle the PPE, and then if later on in the video you learn how to take it off, which is one of the trickiest bits of this. But we also realized that time was of the essence, and maybe just the technology wasn't the main point. So we also recorded a lot of video materials and put this portal together. And what was interesting about it is, one second, it's very, but we record a lot of simulation, for example, around cardiac arrest and things like that. So these are the kind of things we put together. We put this together in about a month, and it got onto and we put it out on the COVID portal on HE. What was apparent to everybody involved in this is just how rapidly we accelerated about 4 years worth of adoption into the NHS of new technologies. HoloLens 2 ended up being used by Imperial in acute settings, for managing on in intensive care units. We managed to get that working. We ended up creating a lot of content. We had pioneered how to shoot under COVID restrictions, which is now being used by the film industry in terms of how to shoot socially distanced and correctly. And then I'd just show you one other thing, which is how this works on HoloLens. I hope you can see this. These images here demonstrate a virtual patient. So we got an actor to actually perform as a sample patient, so that you could look at this as a doctor and get familiar with the symptoms of a COVID-19 patient. At a time when it was very difficult to receive any kind of training at all on this.
That's great.
So just finishing that. So it was a very interesting time. It was all completed in about 8 weeks. And then since that's happened, we found ourselves working in healthcare systems all over the place, along with all of the partners that were involved.
Thank you very much. And Paul, I know you've been doing some exciting collaboration opportunities as well. Can you tell us a wee bit about them?
Yeah, thanks, Moira. Yeah, so StormID have for the last 3 or 4 years been working on different kind of healthcare challenges, and part of that is some of the kind of IP we've developed around the Linus platform, which is designed to allow kind of patient-generated health data to be shared back through with clinical teams. And the way we've developed the platform is it's designed to be kind of open, to allow kind of third parties to innovate on top of it, because there's such a broad amount of innovation going on within the sensors area, within different hardware and devices and so on. And it's really to allow care teams to choose the right hardware or sensor they want for their specialty, and allow that data to be collected and shared into kind of clinical systems inside the NHS. So we've deployed that platform and made it available to the NHS. And then on top of that, we've developed a number of services of our own, and two I'll kind of quickly highlight. One is around kind of COPD, which is effectively lung disease, and that's kind of responsible for kind of the second most common cause of emergency hospital admission in the UK. And the service essentially allows the care teams in the NHS boards and trusts to actually see real-time data about their patients, about their physiology, about their well-being, and so on, and actually see that data aggregated in a dashboard along with data they hold in the EHR. And a number of we've built a number of kind of AI models on top of that, essentially to allow them to stratify the risk of that patient dying within the next 12 months that might drive some anticipated care planning, or indeed that patient potentially having an exacerbation within the next 2 or 3 days that may lead to an emergency hospital admission. So those kind of risk scores and this kind of service model allows them to be much more proactive and a bit more preventative in terms of how they manage those patients, which has a lot of kind of benefits to the patient themselves. So prevents a distressing kind of emergency hospital admission, and a lot of cost savings to the NHS as well. And the final one really is around kind of outpatients. I think, as we know now, I think the waiting times before the pandemic were quite long, and I think since the pandemic now they've really got a lot worse. So the service we've built is to allow kind of outpatient appointments to happen asynchronously and virtually, so that a patient can be invited to an appointment and complete that appointment in their own home using their mobile device at a time that suits them. And so we're kind of scaling that out across the NHS at the moment. And certainly a lot of the feedback from patients is it's more convenient. And from the NHS point of view, it's about 25% more efficient than either face-to-face or a video call.
Paul. So again, thinking about our audience being mainly SMEs, who, you know, again, will be watching with wonder at some of the stuff that you guys are achieving. Can you say a wee bit about some of the organizational elements for yourselves? So have your companies had to rapidly evolve to respond to these opportunities as they come along? And if so, how did you approach it? How did you manage some of those changes that may have had to be done really quickly? Paul, I'll maybe start with you again, and then I'll come to Diane.
Yeah, I think really we've had to recruit quite heavily, I guess, during the kind of pandemic. Certainly over the last kind of 18 months or so, we've built up a data science team in Storm that are now working on a number of kind of very interesting kind of health challenges around kind of stratifying risk and providing kind of real-time risk scores across a range of conditions like COPD and heart failure and so on. And certainly we've made quite a significant investment in sales and marketing as well to actually take the kind of products and services we've developed and actually sell them outside of Scotland and into the rest of the UK and internationally as well. So those are the kind of investments we've made. And finally, I guess, is partnership as well. You know, healthcare is a very broad kind of sector, and certainly there's really good specialists in AI. There's very good specialists in hardware and sensors and so on. And a lot of the work we've done is around kind of generating good partnerships to kind of have a kind of joint proposition to take to market.
Okay, thank you. Diane, any experience from yourself about how the business has had to change to respond to some of these innovations?
So I think we're at a much earlier stage of our development than the other two companies you have on the panel. And our main focus prior to the COVID pandemic was on fibrotic diseases, because in aggregate, these diseases account for nearly 50% of deaths in the industrialized world. So our focus was very much looking at a type of liver disease, which is the third largest killer of people, certainly in the UK, and will become the largest cause of liver transplants anywhere in the world. And so we were really focusing on liver disease and ways that we could build large data sets to tackle that. And obviously, when COVID hit, we stopped and reassessed what we were doing. And it seems very clear that one of the consequences of COVID infection in some people is they will go on to develop what's known as long COVID syndrome. And it seems apparent that one of the outcomes of this long COVID syndrome is an increase in lung fibrosis in some patients. So we have pivoted away from liver fibrosis to look more closely at lung fibrosis, because we anticipate that globally there's going to be many, many more patients who are suffering from this condition, for which there are treatments on the market, but they're not very well tolerated. So we see this as an opportunity for us to use initially the great healthcare data that we have in Scotland, but align that with what's going on in the rest of the world and collect data to see if we can find ways of diagnosing and treating this disease much faster.
Thanks, Diane. Steve, any changes in your approach from a kind of organising the business perspective?
Yeah, I think quite a few things, actually. I mean, one of them resulted from this early work with Imperial and Leeds about how to do production safely. A lot of what we do happens, you know, in filming locations and our own volumetric studios. The procedures, we had to implement, you know, really careful COVID procedures for how to shoot safely. And we got ahead of that quite early. And as a result, we're able to stay in production throughout the pandemic. And so that was one big change. And then by the same in parallel, we had to get used to working remotely. We already knew how to do that, but we had to make substantial investments in IT and home working in order to do that, because one of the consequences of being in production is if you have a case, everybody has to isolate and you have to shut down. So that's why I'm working in my home. So that was a big change in terms of market shifts. Absolutely. Part of our business was around location-based entertainment, so obviously we had to put that on pause. But we have seen big new markets in healthcare, in training, in fashion, which were not markets that we were particularly into to start off with. So yeah, we just had to be very fleet of foot. And I think most importantly, not cut back our capacity. We didn't furlough anybody. We recognized that if we were to keep trading through all of this, then we needed to keep our capacity. And it would have been quite easy to put people on furlough and try and wait it out. Whereas we didn't. We thought about it very hard, but we didn't do that.
Any new digital tools that people are using? So again, in DHI, we started using a bit of a combination of the kind of Miro whiteboard type approach with Microsoft Teams to do some of our online workshops. So any kind of new tools that you guys have been using that have actually helped to support our increased online presence just now? Steve, I'll stick with you and then touch on.
Yeah, we actually built a distribution platform on top of Microsoft Teams where we could share digital assets like holographic captures. The ones we made, we integrated that so that you could actually create these immersive environments from within Teams. There's a good example. That was and then AI. I mean, other panelists have mentioned AI and its impact, and data science. All of these things are absolutely essential, and I think we were in them already. We're using AI to do all sorts of stuff around computer vision, but they have become used throughout our business now.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's interesting. So yeah, so here's the kind of $1 million question here then, guys. So if you were looking back over the journey that your company's taken, where you're at now, and you met up with your younger self in the street and you wanted to share some wonderful words of wisdom about how you got there and the kind of things that helped you. So what would you say were the 3 practical things that helped you on your journey the most? So Diane, start with yourself.
I think for me, the challenge has been that we were trying to fundraise at a time when a lot of potential funders had consolidated their portfolio and were focusing more on that rather than looking for new investments. So I would definitely have started going out and talking to people much earlier than we did. I think having met people face to face and then moved onto a more online interaction would make those conversations much, much easier. I think we probably focused a little bit too much on trying to bootstrap too much and focused on grant funding. And I would definitely have tried to raise investment sooner rather than later. And I think really just thinking about, for us, the engagement with the NHS and with the pharmaceutical companies are the 2 really key things for us. So really focus on building up those relationships and maintaining them, because having those key relationships in place will be vital for the success of Decipher Analytics.
Okay, thanks, Diane. Paul?
It's an interesting question, Moira. I think I'll split the question into kind of 2 things. One, if you're kind of starting a new company or you're kind of entrepreneur and so on, that from a kind of company strategy point of view, then to kind of focus on markets that are going to grow, essentially. So look at growth industries and things that are going to grow. So obviously you've got and big trends, things like climate change and obviously healthcare, which is what we're talking about today. So there's new markets that are being created all the time, and I think there's some big markets that are going to be huge, I think, in the next 5 to 10 years. So I guess my advice from a kind of strategy point of view would be to kind of and I guess from an investment point of view, investors are also invest in markets rather than companies a lot of the time. So So try and find a market that's going to grow a lot, and then within that, obviously try and look at what the new normal was going to be within kind of 5 to 10 years time, and take the whole kind of Wayne Gretzky quote of kind of go to where the puck's going to be and not where it is at the moment. So that's kind of more from a kind of strategy or company strategy point of view. From an individual kind of entrepreneurial point of view, I guess there's a couple of things quotes have always stayed with me is kind of act like you're in first place and work like you're in second place. So I think there's always kind of quotes about failure, but there's one from Churchill that says, I think success is like walking from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm.
Great, thanks, Paul. Steve, over to you. Can you follow that?
No, I really like both those things. I also like that quote. This is not my first company, so I guess I'm quite used to the cycles of jumping from failure to failure, as Paul said. I think the understanding the interplay of investment and a company's growth is something that I wish I had studied a little bit more, not from the perspective of am I going out to raise investment or not. I think it's more just understanding what investment's actually for, which is, and why people invest in a company. A company only needs investment when it's going to grow, and it needs to grow, and I think I have got these, I perhaps got these things confused at the time in the past. So understanding exactly what it is that your expertise is and the market that you're trying to get a relationship to, and then understanding that that's where investment comes in. Those things are, though I wish I'd understood that interplay a little bit better. From a personal point of view, I think I like the definition. I've always liked the ready, fire, aim definition of entrepreneurship. That you have to have momentum in order to get anywhere in this, and that it's totally okay to sort of change tack, change course. There's a VC that I know pretty well who likes to talk about product market fit being his job, and that's all he ever does. But actually that's a very difficult thing to work out, and you're constantly having to make adjustments. So I think focus on that especially is the big one.
Okay, thanks all. I think that's our kind of chat between ourselves, almost at an end, and what we'd like to do now is throw the conversation open to those that have joined us in the session today, and hopefully there'll be lots of questions appearing in the chat function here. So yeah, the live Q&A is just about to get started then. So if people want to continue this conversation and join us in the breakout room, you'll be more than welcome. Thank you.